Do you know what Lil and I have just been doing?
Is it something you want to share?
We've just been winnowing.
Winnowing. So, okay. What have you been winnowing?
We were winnowing recipes.
Right. So the way that it used to work in the olden times is they was kind of there was like a big sieve.
Oh, come on, you're gonna have to follow through now. You can't just
Right,
tease
then
us with a
there
couple.
was like a great big sieve, and you put all of your stuff in the middle of it, and you throw it up in the air, and the I can't do it. The wind would blow the shitty bits out, and it would fall down.
It's also a really good word if you're practicing your Kiwi accent. To winnow.
Oh, you're gonna have to say it for me so I can repeat it.
Winnow.
Winnow. I know, that just sounds like winnow. It doesn't sound Kiwi to me. It's not like fuck scun.
I got a winnow. Oh, winnow. I got a. Oh, anyway.
I got a winnow. Fuck scun. Pen.
Yeah,
Duck.
yeah.
That was deck, by the way, when I said duck.
6.
Big duck.
Oh, good 6.
Big duck.
What a rocking start.
This is a podcast in which two friends have serious conversations about silly things and silly conversations about serious things.
I'm Simon Ellis.
And I'm Lee Miller.
Welcome to Midlifing.
Hey, we have a follow-up from last week, is that right?
We do. Well, yes, we do, because Menna sent me a couple of messages after she'd listened to the show. I think she wanted to hear the unedited version. I think that's the short. I think that's the short.
Okay.
Where she went, wait on, hang on. There's got to be more than that. But the thing that she said, which I thought was very interesting, was she wasn't really thinking about the toxics.
See, I knew that I'd taken us off. Well, actually, you
well,
said
I was the one that introduced
you
it.
said that's true. I was taking full responsibility for being angry.
It's very... yeah, you picked up the ball and ran with it. But she was thinking more about, and she kind of whispered it, and I'm going to whisper it now.
Okay.
She was thinking more about the wokes. That the boys who know the right things to say... and you might say indoctrinated into a particular language, and yet their behaviour does not seem to be any different from what she described.
Oh, that's interesting that she is seeing them as different and distinct, as opposed to just thinking of that as a different stripe of toxicity. Somebody who's learnt the game. Yes,
they haven't quite learnt that the don't actions speak louder than words thing.
Yeah.
I actually had this experience during this week where, someone was quite sophisticated in their, let's say, discourse, in their use of language around these questions. Mm-hmm. Let's say I'll call it the gap or the discrepancy between the discourse and the sophistication of the discourse. And then the way this person behaved was mind-boggling. And it didn't, and I think we're all doing that to a greater or lesser extent. We know, how is it that we understand how we behave in relation to the things we say? It's very complex, isn't it, to navigate and to recognize our behavior as other people see our behavior, in part because, as we've talked about so many times, see episodes, 12, 13, 47. No, that's in the future.
But probably see the future episodes as well.
Yeah. I'm not going to finish the sentence just to make it even more enigmatic.
So for listeners, there was a shit ton cut out of last week's conversation. And that was because, and I think it's maybe useful to say, that it was such a rich conversation between the two of us. I really enjoyed talking to Simon about the things that we were talking about. But man alive, it was a fucking miserable listen.
So what was miserable? Because I don't listen back.
Because we got into the weeds of conversations around, I guess, effectively our different positions on gender theory.
And incels.
And incels came up as well. And just to be clear, when I say different positions, it's not that Simon is pro-incel and I am anti-incel. It's more... just for the record. Nor is it the other way around.
Thanks for the clarification.
It's just important that when people hear this, that they don't go, what do they mean? Different positions
Simon likes
on
incels.
It's not that we weren't taking those kinds of diametrically opposed positions. It was more that in an attempt to try and find nuance in the space between us, we spent a lot of time going, oh, this is really hard. And it was like, I guess the equivalent would be watching somebody work out is not going to be as rewarding as working out yourself. And it felt to me like a really good bit of exercise. And I was definitely like really stiff and achy afterwards, but I didn't want to watch the video back of me just doing burpees, because that's effectively what it would have been. Because I would have just gone, oh, your form is awful. Look how quickly you sweat.
Yeah. I love the idea that I made you stiff and sweaty.
Oh, Simon. Every week. Every week. And we're back to a Kinsey 3.
I reckon we might be working our way up. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because I don't speak to these conversations with an eye to how they're going to sound. I mean, we're just trying to figure stuff out, right? And have conversations. Maybe we'll get better at that. I don't know. It's in a way, I think that's partly my understanding of what our shtick is. I don't want to get into this too much because I think it's not that interesting for us. It's a little bit navel-gazy for us.
Yeah, I think so.
They're kind of not for public consumption until they've been edited. We're not thinking of, which would be such interesting if we were ever to do it live, for example. It would be quite a weird thing. Yeah. Hey,
we got a message. Is that what you're going to say? Are you going to segue?
So do I...
I think you have to, because I know who this is. So
this is from Jamie.
Jamie Lewis Hadley. Jamie Lewis Hadley is a phenomenal young man. I paused over young then because I was like, I'm not sure how young he is anymore, because I knew him when he was a younger man. I still know him. He works in live arts. He's done a lot of really interesting body-based practice, particularly interested in the kind of the interface between masculinities and pain. So he's done a lot of work on wrestling. He's done some stuff on bloodletting and barbers shops, and his work is really lovely.
Wow, there was so many things in there. I was thinking, I wonder how many of our audience are familiar with those ideas. Even like performance art or live art might be.
Well, here's a thing that we'll throw out. If anybody wants us to just ever do a session on on our specialist subjects, if you'd like Simon to talk about release-based choreography, just give us a shout. He'll talk to you all about Limone.
I just fell asleep on my mic. Limone. Did you say Limone?
I did.
Such a choreographer name dropper.
I know, but I have to dig deep into my bag of names so that I don't just end up saying Pina Bausch, because that's
or
like
Martha Graham.
I'm not a Philistine, Simon.
So, Jamie, who clearly is an avid listener, he says this: my granddad often told me to enjoy my body whilst I was young. Once you hit 40, he said, your body begins to slowly break it down. I don't know, Jamie, but I'm not liking him so far. With you both having such rigorous and committed body-based practices, I was wondering, as a person who is fast approaching early midlife, what would you say are the most important attitudes, characteristics, and habits to adopt and or change as our material bodies begin to decline? Begin to ... decline. And he says, Obs, no feedback for you guys, but trust that you are the highlight of my podcasting week. Oh yeah.
What a sweet human.
Love to you both. X.
Oh, love to you,
kiss.
Jamie. That is such a...
Oh my goodness. This is so confronting.
Yeah, this is the time that I have to say I was nearly in hospital this week. So I'm just going to start there. I woke up on Tuesday morning at 4 a.m. with the most intense stabbing pain underneath my right rib cage.
The pain woke you up?
The pain woke me up, which I don't think has ever happened to me in my life. I was woken up by this stabbing sensation, and it was searing and excruciating, and it winded me, and I didn't know where to move or how to move, or even if I could. So my first thought was, I'm having a heart attack.
Down by under your right rib cage.
And then went, No. I'm not having a heart attack because I'm not sweaty, I don't feel nauseous, my arms are not tingling, so there's nothing else that's happening. This is a very localized sensation. Okay, so I ticked that off in my head, which helped me dial down the immediate panic. I kind of went through all of the things. Is it my appendix? It's a little too high for my appendix. Also, I don't feel sick. I'm not nauseous. I'm not sweating. I'm not running a temperature. Okay, so I ticked through all of the things to try and work out if I needed to call an ambulance.
Oh, did you woke up Bob, though, didn't you?
No, because I was trying to decide if I needed to wake up Bob or all of those sorts of things. So I stayed with it until about 6 o'clock. I went for a walk with the dog.
Still in the same kind of pain, or had it shifted?
No, it was still the same level, but the moment I started to walk, it sort of started to reduce. So that I thought, well, this is a good sign. Then phoned the doctor. I got an appointment within 15 minutes. So in I hopped on the table. He pressed me. He asked me to score the pain 1 to 10. He then wrote a note to the receptionist that said, "Get bloods now," and now is in capital letters and double underlined. That didn't worry me at all.
I mean, it could have been get bloods right now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too late for bloods.
Get the leeches.
I wish he'd called me when he woke up as opposed to waiting and going for a walk. Anyway,
so I had my bloods taken. All the time, my pain is reducing, and this whole sort of at the doctor's thing. So from phoning to the doctors was probably the whole thing was less than an hour.
yeah.
And he said, it looks like you might have gallstones and you'll need to have your gallbladder removed.
Wow.
That's if it continued. And he said, it still looks like gallstones, but if the pain starts to reduce, you've just had a biliary colic attack. And when the pain subsides, we'll get you an ultrasound in due course. And then we can
And
we can
are you in
see.
any pain now?
No. I paused there because everything, it feels like the insides of me are a little bruised. So I went off on a really long ramble there about this week. I'd like to hear a more...
Well, not nearly as interesting.
Well, no, I was just thinking a more kind of temperate response.
And I guess that's at the heart of the question, Jamie's question, which is, I've got these bifocal glasses and I have to duck my head quite a long way down to bring it into focus, which means I think I'm a little bit out of mic range. Anyway, speaking of...
I was going to say, ladies and gentlemen, right there.
Slowly breaking down eyes, my goodness. I remember, it was at Menna's place in Melbourne at their family home, and it was the first time in my life that I recognized that I was holding a bottle of wine away from me in order to be able to read the label.
Oh.
And anyway, so yes, that was, and Manna's dad, who it's fair to say likes to tease me, had a good. That was a good night for him seeing me. Yeah, for me, the heart of the question is what would you say? So let's just agree that your body declines. I mean, there's no argument, right? What would you say are the most important attitudes, characteristics, and habits to adopt and or change as our material bodies begin to decline? It's one of those. It's a very simple paradox, and this has been more recent for me than it wasn't when I was 40 for sure, because I was still deep in doing a lot of dancing as a 40-year-old. But now that simple paradox, which is the things that you ought to do become much harder to do, and that's for two reasons. One is, and by that I mean just basic taking care of your body, and I think that's for two reasons. One is that they physically become less pleasurable, so it's more like for me it's more like an encounter with aches and pains, like quite a constant encounter with aches and pains. But also because I've had such a long life of so many physical practices as an athlete, as a dancer, that I'm also a little bit bored. I'm a little bit like, oh my God, I've had enough of doing this kind of thing. And so that is not maybe it's a way to begin a conversation. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. For me, they're simple practices, and if I'm being really direct as a response, what is it that most of us are doing all the time? We're sitting and we're facing the front. So we basically have this ventrally oriented seated posture. By ventrally oriented, I mean we're forward facing. And so to me, anything that's shifting or modifying or awakening the body in ways that are not like that. So lengthening the hip fold, so you do stretching across the front of the hips, giving lots of rotation in the spine, so rotating around the longitudinal axis of the spine. I go, this is very pragmatic, but like that, it's just to recognize what am I mostly doing, and then what habits can I create which are not doing those things. This is dangerously close to our specialisms here, Lee. Slightly freaky.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time over the lockdown period of the pandemic, teaching chair yoga to desk-based administrators and researchers at various universities.
Is that a side hustle?
It wasn't a side hustle. It kind of became one of the things I was doing. Anyway, that's all probably to be cut out. But it is very close to our specialisms, as you said about 20 years ago. But yeah.
I've been waiting patiently, but thanks for agreeing with me.
What's really interesting is you did go immediately to somewhere quite pragmatic.
I know.
And there's a bit of the question that Jamie asked, which I thought was really interesting, which he says, what would you say are the most important attitudes? So the first word he asks is about attitudes. And
I went to habits.
I'm quite interested in the idea of an attitudinal shift. So if you can maintain a level of curiosity and go, oh, what's this about? And then also to kind of try and cultivate a sense of gratitude.
Two things come to mind. Well, one thing is, like for me, there's a missing step in there, which is how is it that you come to notice something's going on and sensitivity to notice something's going on?
I think the reason that maybe we didn't land on that question sooner is that, Jamie asks us as two people who he assumes, actually he knows us both, I think, well enough to know that we do have rigorous and committed body-based practices. And you've just said this week you were, I presume you were in a studio when you were with those other dancers.
I was indeed.
And I presume you were moving around.
Yes, although not as lively as they were. Motherfuckers.
But so I think I'm just thinking that we're probably coming at this question as people who have been paying attention. So I think you raise a really interesting point.
How is it that you come to pay attention, I guess is my question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Lil and I talk about this a lot. And there's something and this is I'm speaking as someone who went to university to study physical education. So my first degree was in physical education at the University of Otago in Dunedin in New Zealand. And when you rock up on the first day, it's just people who have been physically gifted. All they've known is what it's like to be good at sport. And that sport is a central enough part of their lives. And when I say sport, I mean the whole gamut, from people who are rock climbers or mountaineers to rugby players to cricketers, whatever. And that's all they've known. And so these were, not all of us, but certainly a good chunk of us, not me included, were to be the future's physical education teachers. And I don't know what your experience of physical education was like, or indeed if you even had any at primary school and high school, but it was basically going out and playing sport in New Zealand. There was not a single time when there was a conversation about, what is this body? I don't mean from a mechanical perspective, but I mean, what does this body feel like? What's it capable of doing? What's it not capable of doing? What happens if you do this? So there's no sort of sense of, I'll say, arousing exploration or curiosity in the body as a thing to be looked after and as a thing to be nurtured and as a thing to be understood and experienced and changed and mobilized, etc., right? And so there's this horrendous situation where then that just gets perpetuated. So you have physical education, all the kids that are great at sport, they like physical education, they go on to be physical. So you've got these people who are teaching who have never known what it's like not to be in a body that they, let's say, have control of.
You're absolutely speaking my experience, but I'm on the other side of the fence to the one that you're on.
So you were the left out. You were anyway, go on.
Oh, exactly. I was picked last. So, whenever there was teams to be chosen, no, that's okay. I mean, I've come to terms with this.
Breaks my heart because I was always the one doing the picking.
Yeah, and you would not have picked me. You would have done everything you possibly could. You'd have picked the asthmatic before you would pick me, because I was so disconnected from my body, and also the idea of taking pleasure in doing something was impossible because I wasn't good at something. And because I wasn't good at something, nothing was encouraged. Even now, if you throw a ball at me, it will hit me in the face.
I mean, next time I see you, if that ever happens again, I'm going to carry the ball with me just so I can put that to the test.
It will. Even if you're standing behind me and you throw the ball at the back of me, it will somehow come around me and hit me square in the face. It's a skill that I have.
It's like the bullet that killed John F. Kennedy, the magic bullet.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got magic balls, but that's another podcast.
Yes, next week, Lee talks about his magic balls.
So I think the experience that you talk about really, really makes sense for me.
But in a way, it's, it's like it's too late. That's what I mean, is that it's a very broken system, at least I would imagine, in Western education. And I know that there'll be some pockets. And certainly when I was studying physical education, the Swedish system was held up in very high regard in terms of it being a place of, let's call it, I don't know, physical education. Like it says it on the tin, right? But I like that you're drawing attention to Jamie's thing about attitudes, because I think one of the things that was striking about when I started becoming when I went to being a kind of a novice dancer to doing full-time dance training. Still a novice, but going from just dabbling to right into it. And one of the things that struck me was, even though I was very capable and very experienced in, let's say, the body as a machine, I was completely unprepared for the possibilities of developing the kinds of sensitivities that are available to us in relation to our bodies. Is that idea of interoception, where your capacity to sense your organs, to sense the insides of your body becomes really developed. And I guess my point about that is not to show off or even to suggest that I have those things, but rather that both our attitudes to our bodies and our sensitivity to our bodies is incredibly flexible and open to change. And I think that in the sense that it's not necessarily that our bodies are changing all the time, but I think that our capacity to be sensitive to those changes and be sensitive to the body as it is, they're extraordinary and available to all of us. And so there's a kind of an attitude for me, which is I don't have to have this ongoing relationship with my body. I can change this relationship with my body, even as a 40-year-old, even as a 45-year-old, that there's possibilities and space here for me to adopt a different relationship with my body. And there are certainly very particular practices which I think, and I can talk about them, which are incredibly useful for helping that develop that kind of attitude of curiosity and openness.
I wonder, though, is Jamie's question the... So you just said that really interesting thing about the plasticity of the body and the body's ability to kind of
modify,
shift.
Adapt.
I wonder, do we forget as we get older that is always still open to us to a certain degree because the narratives of declination are there for us?
I know. Given Jamie's question, what is it that you would want someone listening to this podcast who he's asking us to help others, to give information to others, right? Asking for advice. My question is, what would you want listeners to take away from this? Like, what's the take-home message?
The takeaway for me would be effectively meet yourself with kindness. Start there. And I don't know what that would take. That's the bit where I kind of have to take my foot right off the pedal and go, okay, so maybe we can't get to curiosity. Maybe we can't get to, here's a series of practices. Maybe we can't do that. Maybe we can just start with try to meet yourself with kindness. And if you're unable to do that, what do you have to do in order to be able to?
See, that what you've just described then, I guess that's what I've been trying to get at, is surrendering. Because I think so much of our lives is spent holding our bodies in relation to the things that are coming at us, whether it's work through a computer screen or whether it's information that was coming at you or a ball coming at you or however, and there's something about like, to me, that word is such a beautiful word to be thinking about the body, surrender. So even if I'm walking and I'm just walking in a park, that I can surrender to that park. I don't have to be filling the park with my presence. I don't have to be going at it hard. I don't have to, right? And so there's something there for me, which that's a kind of body which I think can sustain itself well and a long time into very old age, which is so distinct from that kind of a body that's worn out through hardness.
I'm just going to say this might sound like virtue signaling in a way that it's not intended to. So I'm just going to say, I am really aware that Simon and I have spoken exclusively from able-bodied perspectives. And there is a sense of innate ableism in the way that we have approached this conversation today. Anyway, so I just wanted to sort of put a little pin in that I think we both are aware that there's a big gap that I think can't speak to. I just, I'm just aware that it's it's something that we just didn't. We didn't negotiate or touch upon, and
you're much more you're like an 8 on the Kinsey woke scale compared with me.
It's not.
I'm half asleep still.
I don't think it's about being woke in this instance. I think it's just about knowing wheelchair users, or it's about knowing people with an invisible disability who you say, oh, can we just run and meet up at this point? Oh, and then halfway through the day you send them a text message and say, actually, I can't meet there. And they kind of sometimes quite legitimately can say, fuck you, because it's not that easy for me just to suddenly change what I was going to do, because I've had to do these things just to be able to get to that place. And it's that simplicity of just being able to kind of like change your mind about something.
Sure.
Anyway, it's not about what it in that instance, although I'm sure there have been many moments in the podcast where I have been trying to unintentionally, anyway, show my
signal virtues.
Signal virtues. This was just thinking about a couple of friends who were going,